Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is July 2, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure today to be here with Dick Turner. Where in the heck you calling in from, Dick?
I'm in Paris, France.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Well, it's funny. I watched a couple of your broadcasts, but I didn't want to watch too many of them because I didn't want to be too prepared. But that's one question I have thought about quite a bit. And actually, when I think about it, my basic answer would be reproduction, because I think that probably the most important thing for human beings is to reproduce, and after that, everything's icing on the cake. I mean, the idea is the continuity of the species. After that, I think it can be situationally dependent. But after that, perhaps I would say to feel understood by other people.
Wow, to feel understood. Beautiful. I love reproduction. I actually had that answer once and I was like, that's a no-brainer. That's the best thing, that we keep going, that we keep reproducing. Very, very good. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Well, music by a long shot. Music to me is it's definitely the form of both receiving and expressing information for me.
Both, yeah. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, because I think whether they know it or not, they're searching for truth.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think that composing music and pursuing music is the pursuit of truth, which makes me think, I once heard an interview with Bobby Fischer, and he said playing chess was life. Chess was life. Chess was truth. And I think anything we pursue has a relationship to truth.
Yeah.
And what is truth? I could go into that too.
We're gonna go into truth.
Right.
Let's keep going, because everything will come full circle. You'll be able to suss it out. But that was really beautiful, searching for truth. I love that. So, is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
I think it's a response to our situation. I think we do what we have to do. I think it's survival based.
Yeah.
I think that we do what we do because, well, I can't say all of our behavior is inherently necessary, but I think that in the long run, what we do because we have to do it, because it's linked to our ultimate survival. I guess is what I would say about that question.
Yeah.
I think
that's good. Go ahead.
No, I just think it's necessary. Well, for example, for me, what do I collect? For me, composing music, for example, well, I'll tie into that, is directly, to me, it's essential to my life. For example, when I feel like I make a breakthrough in music, that to me makes sense out of the whole experience for me.
Yeah. That's Duchamp, who's like still living through the person who connected us, tentatively an inconvenience. I mean, cheers to that fine artist who introduced us, but he's like a contemporary Duchamp. Duchamp said, "Get your life and your job as mixed up as possible."
Yes, well, I think that's probably intense space. I think that's probably very specific, very,
Right.
very, and I think probably any artist, it's the same way, because any functioning artist is probably going to use any experience they have ultimately to inform their work.
Yeah.
I would, Tent is a funny example because I think that he is a person who transforms all of his experience into artwork.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, I don't want to get off the topic, but I know, I don't know if he spoke to you about when he was building his house. He not only made videos of the experience of building it, he made music based on adding this addition to his house. So he takes every aspect of his life and turns it into an artwork.
Right.
Yeah.
But I loved your line that said essential to my life, that music is essential to your life.
Yes, it's essential to my life. I can't even imagine what I would do without it.
Yeah.
And I have friends who it might not be music, it might be something else. It might be taking photography. I think maybe that's something which artists share in common. There's this strange behavior they have to engage in to give sense to their life.
Yeah.
Without it, one's just lost.
Yeah.
There is no sense. Why is that? I don't know. Is it psychological? Is it? After that, I don't have to think about that one a little bit.
Well, that's good, Dick, because that's what this series is about, inventing new questions. So the next one is, do thoughts create emotions?
Do thoughts? That's an interesting question. I think thoughts can trigger emotions. Definitely thoughts trigger emotions. And if I think about myself, for example, today, as I was preparing for this broadcast, I decided to listen to Tristan and Isolde by Richard Wagner. And while I was listening to it, I would say that it led me to many thoughts, which then put me into a variety of emotional states, ranging from deep emotions of, like, how can I describe it? Almost like, how can I describe it? Feelings of being overwhelmed by beauty, to more intellectual thoughts about how he basically has a woman throwing a screaming shit fit for an hour and a half in the first act, you know? So I would say that emotions are triggered by thoughts, and perhaps I'd have to think about the other direction. I don't know.
Well, you really get it, Dick, because what this is it's me and you versus the wording on the question. So I'm for, like, changing that word to trigger emotion. These are just prompts for us to have discussion and share thoughts. So the next one is, I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Well, until I can identify what I have to think about. I mean,
Right.
I'd have to have some kind of specific thing, and then I would think about that thing. Like, for example, again, the Tristan and Isolde, or with this new piece I'm working on, like, what can the mandolin do? You know what I mean? Like, then I can apply. Yeah. So then I can have thoughts about it because I have some kind of specific object to which I can apply my thinking apparatus.
Yeah. No, it's great. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. But I've never had that answer. I like it. I don't know what I think until I identify what I'm thinking about. There's this sense of, that's very good.
You know, I would say also the following. When it comes to music composition, there are different stages in what a thought is. For example, when I compose music, I still like to work. The first stage is when I work on paper, and I write down short sketches. And then when I start, then I might think about them and sometimes improvise with them on the piano, or just try to get ideas about them. Sometimes I lay in my bed and just imagine what I can do with them. And then when I actually start to write the music, I use a computer now to write the final copy because I can make the parts so easily. And when I do that, something else might emerge. And it kind of reminds me of what Kubrick said about making a film. You know, he said there's writing the screenplay, shooting the movie, and then editing it. And so I think each of those steps creates a different set of thoughts, so that's something, and the different things you react against. If, and as everybody knows, if you're composing or writing or something like that, sometimes a so-called error happens and you can use that. But as Miles Davis said, there are no errors. So that's kind of how I feel too when it really gets down to it. I'll take whatever comes my way, and just like if I have an idea, if it fits, it fits. If it doesn't, I'll get rid of it,
Yeah. Very discerning. Great. Dick, can humans think without language?
Do you mean verbal language? You mean words?
Well, again, you put the questions into the context you want, but you can define. I mean, language is endless. How we can define.
Well, I would say can humans think without language? No, because to me, if language is extendable to beyond words to sounds and objects, I think that people are always thinking about, human beings are always thinking about something, for God's sake. They're thinking either about tones or the interaction of words, or even or sculptors might be thinking about shapes. It seems to me you'd have to have some set of objects in one way or another, words, sounds, physical objects to manipulate in order to create new relationships between those things. And if not, I don't really know what you'd be thinking about. Why would you even need to think, really? Why would you need to think if you weren't thinking about some specific thing, which then could be called a language? If does that make sense?
It made a lot of sense, and you anticipate the next 3 or 4 questions. Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I would say it depends on what level. That would depend on what level we're talking about. For example, I would say that on a micro level, that is for myself, I keep working. So let's say, for example, I'm working on something musical, and I feel like the other day, about 2 months ago, I came to the end of the road. I came to the literal end of a road that I've been going down for years and years and years, and I realized that's over. And I sat there in a panic, and then suddenly I had a new idea. And suddenly a new road opened up that now to me seems endless. Now that's me on a micro level. But on a macro level, let's say the level of a society, and perhaps we're seeing that happen to some degree today with a kind of global thought, or with globalism or multiculturalism. I find there's two options. There's either a struggle to create a common language, or what I'm afraid might be happening is like the erasing of any kind of real culture to create a median level of thinking, a median level of thought, which is easier to relate to. So therefore, instead of having anything too intensely personal, we kind of stay in the middle. And that means we can all relate to each other, but nothing really interesting happens. If that answers
exactly. So well put. So that there is that, we call that is a resonating interval, the in-betweenness. That's what life's all about. But it was you really feel filled this spectrum or this comprehensiveness. And it's sort of a stupid question, but your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Um, I, I really see things in terms of survival.
Yeah,
Neither of those. I'm not sure if there's. I think both those categories play a part in that.
yeah,
But I think we're more reactive beings. We're
yeah,
reactive beings. We're not thinking necessarily. Sometimes we're thinking, sometimes we're emotional, but we are reactive beings. And just like the earlier question, we react to what's in. We react with the things there with us, and
yeah,
that's good. I think that we are very adaptive creatures. We're
yeah,
very adaptive. So therefore, if a situation requires, I'm not sure what the structural meaning of an emotional response is. I know
yeah,
I'm more comfortable in the realm of thought. I enjoy thinking. I enjoy having ideas.
yeah,
I don't really trust emotions that much. Although I think I'm very emotional, and I'm hoping I don't become too emotional on your program because that can happen. But meaning, very, like, but anyway, but I find that I'm intellectually oriented.
yeah.
I'm also very emotional, but I would say that my main thing is I feel that people react. For example, I recall reading a long, long time ago in I know, do you know what a Sunny surplus store is? Ever heard of this? Maybe it was just,
No, what is it?
there were these military surplus stores that existed.
Oh, okay, yeah,
It
I
was
know what they are.
filled with like fake hand grenades or emptied
Yeah,
hand grenades and like
yeah,
helmets. I once read a book. I was thumbing through a book which I ultimately bought. It was a Marine Corps training manual,
yeah,
and they were saying that the Marine in a jungle situation must be like an animal. An animal supposedly always is never focusing on anything, because if I focus on one thing, then I'm losing my peripheral vision. So
yeah,
animals supposedly in the jungle, they're kind of looking at everything in a fuzzy way, because if you don't focus on anything, you're aware of all possible attacks. So if something leaps down, you can react. You can always react, and that's what I mean by reactive. I
yeah,
think I think that we as human beings, I think we as human beings have these categories: thought, emotion, etc., which we feel comfortable with. But I think there might also be a kind of basic, I don't like to call it animal, but I guess there is a certain animality to our
yeah.
existence too. And I think that comes into play somewhere in this question.
Yeah, no, it's really important. There's a bumper sticker that says, "Don't believe everything you think." And then Bridget Bardot said, "When I make love, I don't think." So we think we can separate thought from feeling, but they're so connected. But so we invented words. So we think the words go, "Well, I'm more feeling here and I'm more thinking," but they're so interconnected. But you brought up so many good things. TSA, that thing about the animal instinct, that's TSA, that's tactile situation awareness. So my
Oh,
friend says what kids are now, they got a cell phone on and a TikTok here and a Instagram here, and they got all these screens going at once. I mean,
yeah.
we're two screen right now. And so that's like a bomber in a pie, like going back to your thing about Marines, the airplane pilot, when he gets hit by a bomb, he doesn't go, "Oh, I better check this gauge and this gauge." He's got to react by looking at everything, like you said, peripheral. And
Yeah.
that's how kids, and so they're not relating to just one thing. We grew up relating to, "Oh, here's my transistor radio. I'm going to listen to music." We were more one we were doing some peripheral, but it was more one. Now I'm going to go watch TV. Now I'm going to go out in the street and play with my friends. So that animal instinct you talked about really resonated with what I study. I appreciate that. But here's two questions to further this from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, since I have the right to rephrase your questions,
Please.
I'll just say once again, I think thinking is a is a function of reacting to information of various types. The soul is something which, that's something I'd like. Maybe I should make a small comment about my feelings about language, spoken language, and why I write music. I hope I can do this clearly and concisely. My feeling about language is that it was basically developed sometime in the past, with the idea of having specific signifiers, like hey Jerry, give me the pen. Jerry, can I have a beer? Can I, there you go, right? and then we have the words which signify something. So then, in the absence of that thing, so for example, we have a word for elk. I say, hey Jerry, there's some elk back there. Let's go get them so we can have some dinner, right? So they're very specific things. After that, there are these words like soul, life, love, God. Words. These are different words.
Yeah.
And we use them as if they signify something specific, like pen, like elk, like my telephone, like this glass of water. But I don't think they do. I think we use them as if they are specific signifiers, but they are not. And so therefore, I even if you say I like ice cream and I say I like ice cream, that does not mean that our conception of liking ice cream is the same. And so therefore, just to round out my thinking, my thoughts about verbal communication, I think it's about people communicate. That's why in the very beginning part of this interview, I said that I thought one of the most important things for people is to feel that they're being listened to and understood, right? That even just being listened to is good enough. Like
that's huge.
If I feel that you're listening to me, at least I feel like I've had the chance. I've had the chances you can understand me. Like there's a great book by Faulkner, Absalom. Perhaps you've read it. It's about this boy. I think it's the night before he kills himself, and he's talking to his college roommate about his experiences in the South. And he says all he wants is one person to understand his experience.
Wow.
And that's something which has always meant a lot to me. The desire that just one person hears him. And I think that desire is what motivates a lot of artists too. That feeling that their song, be it whatever form it's expressed in, has been heard.
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts about spoken language.
That's so right on. I resonate with that. I mean, the act of listening is truly an art form, and that Faulkner anecdote was beautiful. It brought tears to my eyes because all I want is one person to understand.
Yes.
That is such a passion.
And the other thing is, we can't be sure that you do understand.
Exactly.
However, if I express myself and I see you there listening to me, paying attention to me, that is meaningful for me. It isn't like, it isn't like give me a beer and you give me a beer. That's on, So anyway, there you go.
But it's also the phenomenon of what we're doing is live TV. And this is my interviews for 40 years changed because of COVID, because I went online, and I hate to say they're way better because, Dick, if we were in the same room, we would not be as concentrated on each other's eyes and face. Our eyes would wander in the room. And you know, people are like, oh, that's horrible. Online is worse. I want to do it in person. I'm saying, dude, I'm not flying to Paris this week and you're not here, and it works out good. But the other thing you evoke is T.S. Eliot. When I talk to you, I've got to use words, you know, and you don't. I mean, we could have done this whole thing on instruments or something, but we want to feel like words kind of work, and they do kind of work.
I do feel that. Yeah, I don't want to say that. I just feel that when we I'm not trying to imply that when we speak, we're saying nothing.
Yeah.
I'm not by any means implying that, because if I not at all, because I mean, I do write. I write books. I've written plays and films and stuff like that. So I play, but it's a different kind of. It's just that when you use the word soul, that's one of those heavy words.
Oh, it's the big word in that question. Everybody says, is thinking of functional soul. They go, well, what? It depends on what you mean by the soul. And it's like, well, we sort of have a collective feeling what we kind of think was. But let's go to the second Turing question. Can machines think?
Oh, God. Can machines think? I can't respond to that question. I can say that machines can help me to think, so they can participate. They can participate in my thought process. As far as whether they can think for themselves, you ask a machine. I have just no idea.
That's good answer. Beautiful. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Now you're getting personal.
That's good. I love it, Dick. I don't get that very often, and it's like very true. Yeah.
Do I pursue happiness or meaning? I would say that I pursue happiness. No, I pursue meaning, but when I find it, it brings me happiness.
Yeah, because I got it from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says, meaning tends to last. Happiness doesn't necessarily last. But that's the question. The answer I get the most is, when I get meaning, I'm happy. So that it's like there's so much interconnection. It's like this one. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it, or are we more so creating it?
Well, again, I feel that it goes back to the animal in the woods for me.
Yeah.
Or the Marine hoping not to get shot to death. Yeah. I think that we're wired or built or originally built or spent a lot of time in situations which were life-threatening.
Yeah.
So I think consciousness is basically a reaction to being in the situation.
Yeah.
That's how I see it,
No, that's good. What's faster? What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Oh, God. Well, I can only speak for myself, but I think probably the speed of light is faster, because with me, it takes me a long time to actually formulate my thoughts. I mean, I normally have an immediate thought, but then I develop it. That's also why I think I write music, because any kind of art, at least the kind of art that I do, I know like Tent is really into improvisation, for example, but I like to write music out and structure it. So therefore, I write it over a long period of, not always a long period of time, but over a period of time, which means I can think about it in stages. So, so I would, on the other hand, I would say, considering that the speed of light is what it's electrical movement, I would say, in a sense, perhaps with a banal thought, maybe they're equal. I don't really know, man. I don't.
That's all right. There's a poet that's named Audre Lorde. She said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer responded and said, "You can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?"
What? I don't suggest any particular new tool. I don't think that. What I suggest is something which I feel is very important, which is questioning the I not new tools but new questions and new things to be questioned.
Yeah.
Something. And let me just try to be clear about this. Just as a small example, when we study music, for example, in the conservatory, which I did for better or for worse, and with private teachers for better or for worse, you learn a number of different things: harmony, counterpoint, rhythmic development, the idea of development, different forms, all these different things. And these are things you learn, different, fugues and all this kind of stuff. But there are other things in music which you take for granted. And those are things which have to be questioned. And I think that no matter what medium you're working in, and this goes back to the idea of pursuing truth, no matter what medium you're working in, there's certain things which are taken for granted.
Yeah.
Excuse me if I'm not going to delineate exactly what I mean, but give examples of that, because that's what I'm working on now. I don't feel like exposing it to the universe quite yet. But I think in any endeavor we're engaged upon, the idea is just to continually ask questions and question the things which are not supposed to be questioned.
Exactly. I'm 100% with you, because that's what my series is all about, is inventing new questions and considering the old ones. But I loved your idea of new questions and question the stuff that you take for granted. In fact, you're anticipating the question 2 down the road. So let's go. What new toy do you suggest?
What new toy do I suggest? I would say the only thing which has really, the only new toy or anything which of that nature which has really had an effect upon my life is the ability to write music on a computer, which allows for the quick creation of parts.
Yeah.
So I find that to be very productive. I also find that it's useful to. It means you can think about something, come back the next day, and change it effortlessly. You don't have. I mean, it used to take me, for example, a number of years ago, I wrote a sonata for cello and piano. It took me 10 days to copy out each part. Now it takes it takes a little bit of time, because with these programs you have to, maybe you know about them, you have to correct sometimes, like the phrase markings are like screwed up or something. But it's so much that's a toy I like. In terms of theoretical toys, I don't know if I'm really into toys at all. I think I would prefer things which might, whatever toy would help people to relate on a more direct way. I don't know. I have to think about that one for a little while. Maybe at the end of the show I'll have an idea. I find that I invented one toy in my life. I invented a long time ago. I invented something called the smile machine. Yeah. And it was just 2 plastic things you stick in your mouth to make it look like you're smiling, right?
Yeah.
And so, but for me, that was a toy that was like was a toy, but it was also an idea, Yeah. And I would say that, I guess it also depends on how you define toys. I mean, because music, for example, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by toy, but a toy as an object to be played with. Um, Geez, I don't know. I really don't know where to go with that
Well,
question.
Dick, you're both your examples were great because you know, using a computer to write your music is kind of like a toy because the phenomenon with music is you don't work music, you play music. So
Uh,
right there, that's perfectly applicable. And if you watch CBS Sunday Morning today, they have a 9-minute spot on the new Louis Armstrong documentary, and a couple minutes is taken on the fact that he smiled all the time and even got in trouble for smiling. And he's fucking black, and they're beating the, they're discriminating, and he's still smiling and creating amazing music. So I love the idea of your smile machine. I wanted you to bring that up, so that was great. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
well, there are a lot of different things. Hoping sometimes that certain thoughts will not enter my head because I've had some family tragedy recently, and
Yeah,
I hope that those thoughts will not come into my mind.
yeah,
So I also, normal. Depending on the situation, I mean,
yeah,
if I might be having, unless there's something, specific to a particular moment in my life where I might be having financial difficulties or worried about doing an interview on someone's with a guy from Venice, California, and how I'll come off, and But other than that, I guess sometimes I find I have thoughts which come into my mind almost against my will, and that's can be uh, that can be
yeah. We
troublesome.
all have that. That was well put. So here's what you touched on already.
Yeah.
McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound the poet that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might be able to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Dick, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I'm sorry, there was a break in the audio there for a second.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the entire question.
Yeah. It's like, why do we humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, I'm not. I wonder if the artist is even necessarily consciously aware that.
No, they don't necessarily are aware of it, and not all artists do it, and not all people are ignoring it. But it's sort of like when you brought up the animal thing, it's similar. Like the animal, the Marine must be like the animal and see the whole big picture, the obvious and the hidden. So they have to sort of, so artists tend to deal with things that we're not always aware of. Like the Faulkner example you got, there's something a little deeper than the surface story. And you were able to read into it. So he broadcasts Faulkner was broadcasting something deeper. It was probably about being raised in the South,
Yeah.
identity, the whole phenomenon of, you mean I have a choice to commit suicide or not? All these things, the artists sort of bring them to surface, and it might help us, but it's not a rule that it's every artist does it and every consumer of art ignores it.
Yes.
But in general, how effective is art really communicating its hidden psychic effects? Well, some artists, you brought up Kubrick. Kubrick pretty much does that kind of successfully. So with Faulkner, Wagner, the people you brought up, they tend to bring up things that are hidden.
Well, I like to make one point,
Yeah.
and something which I feel now. Um, I think something that artists can do, at least something which interests me as an artist, is trying to deal. And I hate to use this word because it sounds like one of these art school words, but to try to show the process.
Yeah.
In the work of art.
Yeah.
So that I'm very sensitive to being manipulated.
Yeah.
I don't like being manipulated. It's one of the reasons I can't watch most films. I can't watch television. Most music doesn't interest me. The music and even now, for example, there's a famous story, at least for me, it's a famous story. I didn't mean to just talk about Wagner all night, but I'll just one more story. Before Wagner premiered Tristan and Isolde, he said to his wife, "Well, Cosima, tomorrow's the premiere of Tristan, and I really hope the performance is going to be bad." And Cosima said, "What do you mean, Richard? Why would you want a bad performance?" So Richard said, "Because if it isn't, the people are going to go crazy." Now, what does that mean? To me, that means something very specific. He was aware what he was doing was manipulative. His
yes.
music, and he was a giant of emotional manipulation. And I think he learned this, of course, from other people, Beethoven being the big daddy of them all. But he was really the change was Beethoven. But Wagner learned his lesson really good from Beethoven, learned the lesson from Beethoven. Now I would say that now the job is, then people reacted to Wagner. But I still think they didn't learn the full lesson how to react.
That's amazing. And he knew that. He knew. He says, I hope it's bad so they don't. That's a heavy thing to do.
And he was correct. He was correct. It might be difficult for people to realize now who don't know about the historical context of that opera, but it blew people's minds.
Yeah.
Because it dealt with new ideas of sexuality, the linking of sex and death. Plus just purely in a musical way, it's overwhelming. And so.
Well, wait. Let's hold on, Dick, one second. Was the performance bad, No, it was great. So it did. It worked. It blew people's minds.
I think he was making kind of a joke, because I think he was just saying. I think he was saying, wait till they see what I'm going to lay on them now. So anyway, my point in telling that story is that something I think which is very important now for artists, at least for this artist, to the degree that I am an artist as a composer, is to try to present information in a way that aids people in their conscious in the conscious intake of what they're experiencing. For example, over the last few years, you may have noticed, I'm sure, during the COVID business, which we're still in a kind of weird way, there's been this hysterical emotions, Trump first of all, and then COVID and all this kind of stuff, with people becoming very, openly antagonistic, people who are friends becoming antagonistic, endless couples. I've heard endless stories of couples breaking up, et cetera, because they were forced into too much propinquity, too much contact. And I think one of the things was I think it's very important now for us human beings to step back and to look at whatever we're in contact with, be it music, art, and say, I don't want to be manipulated anymore. I want to, I don't want to be. And if the emotions are there, the emotions are there, and they're honest emotions. You see, I don't mind emotions, but I don't like having my buttons pushed. I don't mind. I'm a human being. I'm going to have emotions, but when I'm feeling I'm being played for my emotions, they can. I'm not interested. I throw it in the garbage can. It's not that I'm not susceptible to that, because I am. I'm just as easily manipulated as anybody else, but I'm very sensitive to it. So I say no. I just say no, and then and so that's what I feel currently is important in art, is things which raise that raise people's consciousness of what they're involved in, and also, just to be honest, and while at the same time entertaining them in the highest sense of the word. I mean, entertainment is, to me, is a very serious business.
Yeah.
Anyway. So
no, it's beautiful. What you said covers so much, and it's what Louis Saul and I, who studied with Boulanger, that right there in Paris, who's a composer too, and we talked about movie music for a few minutes in our podcast the other day, and how he kind of hates John Williams because when he came out of E.T., he came out of E.T., he couldn't stop crying because he was so manipulated by the music. It told him how to feel. And then, I told
that's not my problem. Please continue.
Yeah, and then I told the story about how Betty Davis was walking up the steps in a shot in a movie, and she goes, "I don't want Max Steiner following me up these steps," to the director. But indeed, Stephen Smith, this other great person, he just wrote the new book on Steiner and saying how Betty Davis loved Max Steiner and made her career, but she was just sort of saying it off the cuff, like, I want to show my acting chops off. Don't enhance it with some, slappy soundtrack. And then who changed movie music was like Bernard Herrmann. But then, we got back to this, whatever. It's not a criticism of John Williams so much. It's more trying to illustrate what you're saying is, how much does this art aid the person in raising their consciousness of the process, or knowing how they're being manipulated and how aware they are? But here's McLuhan saying exactly what you said in 57. It's misleading to suppose there's any difference between education and entertainment. It's always been true that whatever pleases teaches more effectively. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong that he said, but I'm curious your thought of the difference between education and entertainment. And is this true? Whatever pleases teaches more effectively. Would you agree, or what? Any sort of thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, I have thoughts on that. Yeah, I think it's a question of what's that word? I can't remember the word now. I think it's a question of predisposition.
Yeah,
I think it's a question of. I think that if someone's, I think not all people are necessarily. I can't say, but I would say in terms of my experience, it seems to me that the things, if I am predisposed to like something and it's how can I put it? God, hold on for a second.
Yeah, no hurry. This is good. You take a breath.
Hold on. It's that whether it's pleasing or not, one's predisposition might make something pleasing for one person, which is a torture for someone else. For example, some people don't like classical music, and that's fine. And so listening to that for them is like being tortured.
Yeah.
And other people do, and it's pleasurable. Like the other day, I heard a trio by Mozart, which I loved, but I can imagine other people feeling that they're being held against their will in hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's a question of our individual predisposition. Why I th- I think some things which might be difficult for some people could be. The problem is that they don't have a doorway to get into them. But if you can give someone a doorway, once they can get into it, then they can kind of move around. But sometimes it seems like they're just standing in front of a brick wall and there's no doorway. But I guess that's the best way I can answer that. By the way, before we continue, I want to say I just want to say this really quickly. I don't take film music seriously.
Yeah.
I just don't take it seriously, any of
Yeah.
it. To me, I would say yes, Bernard Herrmann's interesting, but because he did, but none of it really does anything for me. None of it.
Yeah, it's sort of like Louis Buñuel saying, if you come out of a movie and go, wow, the cinematography was great, the filmmaker failed. If you come out of the movie and go, wow, the soundtrack was great, they fail, because they're supposed to be telling a story and integrating it and not having this one thing. So, yeah, no.
I'm not impressed. Technique doesn't interest me.
Yeah.
I'm not impressed by technique or people who can compose like Ravel, Wagner, or whatever they do. It doesn't interest me. I'm really interested. For me, as I said earlier, music for me, I have a pretty hardcore vision of this. But for me, it's the pursuit of truth.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm not interested in other things.
Yeah.
I mean, I have been at other points in my life,
yeah.
but that's just not where I am now. And I would say, even when I was younger, I think when I was even very young, when I, for example, liked the Beatles, I think even that for me was a very serious thing. It wasn't just, I think I felt there was something that was being said that was had an innate truth value. I no longer feel that way. But and if someone feels that way about John Williams, great. That's just not where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, I agree with you about the Beatles too. In fact, this is really important. I'm going to go into the truth word in a second, but one more question in that regard. Do artists have moral obligation?
If they choose to, yes. I think that I feel a tremendous obligation not to be full of shit.
That is great. But okay, let's go to the truth thing. Now, Louis Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. Now, 90% of people go, I'm for that. I love it. And one person finally challenged me. He said, that's bullshit, because if I'm going to pursue something, it's because I want to find it and reach it. So the cliche goes, the destination is more important the journey is more important than the destination. Sorry. So if the journey is more important than the destination, why do we have to name or seek a destination?
Well, I think it's like philosophical inquiry. I think that it's an ongoing process. I think that it's incremental. I think an artist could feel very for example, if one is able to question the things which are assumed as eternal realities, then one maybe has identified a truth, but that's not the end of it. That means now there's work to do on that. So I think it's an ongoing process. That's why I'm not too worried about the end of music or anything like that. I'm not too worried. It all depends on people, Sometimes you can kind of despair when you look around you and see a lot of people just don't care about things which you might feel are important. But I'm not too worried about that, because I think in the long term, our survival, people will go. Yeah. Anyway, anyway, I think I made my point that
No, you made it, Dick, and it's amazing how much you're saying. It resonates. It's like you're putting words out that I go, that's something I've thought about or I like to think about, because I don't like when everybody's freaked out about chatbot, and then now composers are going to lose their jobs because the music's going to be written by computers. Like, so what? It's just another tool. It's like the computer doing your score for you. It's just another tool, and it's going to shape our behavior, and so deal with it. The question, the follow up, because you brought it up with the word reality, is perception reality?
Man, ask Immanuel Kant.
That is a great answer. What would he say?
I have a book. What did we say? It takes about 1,000 pages for him to go into it. Is perception? I think it's part of reality. Is it total reality? I think it's part. I think it has a large degree of reality to it. I think it also might have a large degree of interpretation. I think we interpret things, and that's why some. So yes and no.
No, that's good, because there's two that you evoked there. One is Lily Tomlin said, reality is just a collective hunch.
Yeah.
So it's all of the sort of going, yeah, we sort of all agree this or that. But the other one I love is science is uncovering facts that can be interpreted many different ways. That's what, like you saying, it's part. Perception is uncovering things that can be interpreted various ways, and then reality is in uncovering things that can be interpreted. So it's up to the interpretation. Yeah. So are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Neither. I'm afraid of the people who might use them to hurt me.
Yes, very good. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Oh God, I have a million of them.
Well, just one. Let's go to one or two, or early memory.
Okay, give me a second.
Yeah, no worries.
Do you remember? This is one that comes into my head. Do you remember those Sinclair blow-up dinosaurs that were available in gas stations years ago?
Yeah.
I can remember riding one as a child. I guess I was about 1 or 2. I can also remember watching King Kong when I was very, very young. That's about it. I have many others. Those are 2 memories of mine.
But watching King Kong on the big screen or TV screen?
No, we had a very, very small television. I mean, it was the strangest kind of. The cathode ray tube must have been about a foot long. The screen was maybe this big, right? and the box it was in was huge, and I remember really enjoying it. Well,
but isn't it? It's amazing. King Kong is big, but you saw it in a small TV. That's a real like.
Well, I imagine my face was like 3 inches from the screen. I don't know. But God, yes. Oh, yeah. Anyway, let's not go into that because I have so many. That's a real Pandora's box. But please continue.
Well, here's the question to follow up, Dick. And thank you. This is truly enlightening for me. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
And all these questions, they remind me that reminds me. Have you ever read Manfred by Lord Byron? That's what he says. He calls up the goddess and she says, "What do you want?" He says, "Forgetfulness."
And my God, what do you want? Well, that's Joyce. Yeah. Wait, just really quick. Joyce says in Finnegan's Wake, remember to forget.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But I love that. What do you want? Forgetfulness.
Yeah.
That's really good. So go ahead. Yeah.
I don't, in my personal life, I found the difficulty with memory. So almost every memory I have is like a two-way street.
Yeah.
It leads both to positive memories and negative memories.
Yeah.
I have very few memories which I could call 100% positive, and I have very few memories that I could call 100% negative. It seems like there's always a kind of back and forth. If you take a road long enough, you get to the wasteland.
Okay, Dick, I got to tell you, this woman told me it's one of my favorite lines. I ask these questions. Is it more this or more that? It's like, I know it's both and it depends. And it's just a prompt to have a discussion. But she said, is it more this or more that? She goes, the word more doesn't function in your question.
Oh.
Talk about wording, because I could just say, is memory curse or blessing? But I add the word more because I know it's both, and it wavers, like you said.
Yeah.
And it's how you process it, how you navigate, integrate it into your life. Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
You want one person in my family and one person outside of my family?
Yeah, just briefly,
For God's sake, it's like the previous question. I mean, I would say I would say that to the degree that I have consciously formed my personality or my identity, I would say it's both in positive and negative reaction to the people I've met, including the people in my family. For example, I could say that obviously there's the parental and maternal figures, right? So I would say that both of those people, my mother and my father, have had tremendous effects on me, tremendous definitional effects upon my identity. However, I would say also a big part of it is that I've been in reaction against aspects of their character as well.
Yeah.
And I would say that's probably true with my friends. If I think about friends, the ones who really, I have to tell you the truth. I mean, at the risk of sounding like a vain, pompous ass, I really have followed my own path so much that I've never tried to copy anybody. And that's why it's taken me my entire, composers, for example, so many composers, they go to school, they have a composition teacher, and they compose, and they learn composition by composing like that teacher. I never did that. I was always, I would meet these composers and I thought, I just didn't think they had it. I didn't care about what they were doing. I didn't understand it. Also, I didn't care. My idea was my goal as a composer was to find my truth, not to pursue theirs. So I really don't feel that in my case, at the risk of sounding pompous, which I don't mean to sound, I just don't feel that in terms of who I am, I've ever really tried to copy anybody, and that maybe that's.
I understand what you're saying. It's so important. In fact, Harold Bloom's Anxiety of Influence covers this. He's like, you absorb your influence, then you abandon them. But the way you stated it, it was even deeper for me to hear that you were like, well, I can see these people doing it, but I have my own path. Dick, where did that come from? That sense of I have these teachers, but I have my own path. Was that kind of independence of your own?
When I was a young guy, for better or for worse, probably for worse, I really, I didn't, I just didn't take other people seriously. I would go into the
Yeah,
conservative, and I felt on equal footing with them. Like, for example, I remember now I could feel embarrassed about this now, but I don't. I just don't. When I was 16 years old, I'd composed maybe one or two little teeny pieces, right? And I was at the Peabody Conservatory in the kids department, which was called the preparatory, a trombone student, and I'd composed a couple of pieces, and I'd had them played by the brass ensemble. They were really simple. You know, I wouldn't want to have anyone listen to them now, but at the time I loved them. I thought they were great. And what I liked about them is I felt like, look, even though they're simple, I can see very clearly that I have a melodic sense, a harmonic sense, and a rhythmic sense. That's what it gets down to. So I'm the equal of everybody on earth. So I want to visit. So I mean, I want to visit these composers like really famous guys like George Crumb. You ever heard of him? Like, you know, he's a great composer, right? I mean, Otto Lerning, who'd worked with Cage, Karol Husa, who was a Czech guy, and another guy named Hugo Weisgall. And so I would talk to these people, and now I realize they must have just thought, I don't know what they thought about me, but except like, this kid just doesn't know his place. And so that's kind of how I was. And I could regret it now and say, well, gee whiz. And so I would say that's kind of my strength and my weakness, man. That's like my strength and my weakness. I mean, I do my own thing and I just can't help it. And that's why it's taken me my entire life to get where I'm at. You know, I mean, I've gone through different stages. I mean, I think my music, it changed in many radical ways. I mean, because of things which has happened in my life, and also because where I am intellectually. But I've just pursued my own thing. You know, I think I got that from my dad. I think I got that from my father. My father
that's exactly what I was going to ask. Did you get that do my own thing more from your parents and how they raised you, their DNA, or on your own? So you're saying your dad.
I think that my father also was, to some degree, when he was younger. When we got older, I think things changed. But he did, you know, in that, I don't remember what film it is, but in some film, Clint Eastwood says a man's got to know his limitations, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think he's probably correct, but some people don't.
Yes.
And they learn the hard way. And I think maybe I've learned the hard way.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know what else to say besides that, really. I mean,
well, Zappa says without deviation, there's no progress. It's interesting because so often deviating from, you know, saying I don't have limits is a way to become have epiphany or whatever. So it does take courage. But I'm curious, did your parents raise you a particular religion?
I mean, no, none of the extant religions that exist. We were not participants in any of the extant religions. However, religion was present in my life, but not in the sense of going to churches and things like that. Both my mother was in reaction against being a Catholic. She purposefully did, you know, we were all, I think my brother, sister, and I were all consciously aware that we were not being raised Catholic. You know, if that, like, we're not Catholic, we're not being raised Catholic. And we also, on my father's side, we have Jewish relatives, a very old Jewish family. And we were not being raised Jewish, you know. However, my father had no Jewish identity either, but still he would read me he would read sometimes the Bible, but I don't think, when I say that, it wasn't it wasn't like some kind of Ozzie and Harriet scene. He would like read it the same way he might read T.S. He also used to read me poems, right? So
Wow, he read you T.S. Eliot. That's
oh
amazing.
yeah, my God, oh yeah, yeah. I remember
Well,
he read me Garantian once. I'll never forget it. We were in the kitchen. He read me the poem Garantian, which I thought was funny.
that's amazing. So, do you pray?
Do I pray? Good heavens, you're really getting in there now. I have prayed. Yes, I do. Well, again, I'll just say it. Since between me and you and the universe here, I feel that my whole life is a prayer.
Yes, that's
I feel,
beautiful.
I feel, I feel my behavior is a prayer. I feel my behavior is worship. I feel, I don't really want to go into religion because it really freaks people out. But to me, it's like God is everything, and that's
Yeah.
it. And so if I do anything, sure. I mean, I pray in different ways. I mean, one thing I find is every time I go into a church and try to pray, the times I find myself in churches, synagogues, or any of these places, I feel so far away from any kind of Holy Spirit that it's almost impossible to describe. I find that's whatever that's worth.
Dick, that was heavy. It's really touching me deep. And if God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Well, I just said I think God, not if God exists. I,
But I mean, it's sort of a stupid question. Like, if there's a voice, if
God
there
to
was
say,
some sort of voice that could speak this everythingness, what would you like that voice to say to you?
come on, man, this is like a W.C. Fields joke.
Do you know? Do you know that that's one of my favorite jokes? He's reading the Bible, and the guy goes, "What are you reading the Bible for?" And he goes, "I'm looking for loopholes."
Man, I can't answer that question.
That's fine.
What would I want God to say to me? I'd have plenty of. I mean, if God was there, I mean, I don't know, man. Come on, I can't answer that question.
Okay, Dick, I got to tell you, 80%, 90% of people go, "You did a good job." It's like, oh, okay, I think it was Lewis the other day. I says, "What do you want God to say to you?" And he goes, "Nothing."
Yeah.
But it's like, it is an amazing sort of stupid scenario. If this voice could say something to you, a lot of people say, well, I would ask him, ask it that,
Yeah.
So anyways, do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Well, I definitely, I don't, evil's a big word, but I would definitely say that I have met people who seem to consciously do things to hurt other people.
Yeah.
So if that's evil, that exists. I have met people who not only will do things and give you bad advice, hoping that it hurts you, but they take pleasure in it. So if that's evil, that exists. I've seen that. I've experienced that. As far as the abstract concept of evil, I can't really comment on that.
Yeah. Well, the hidden question really is, Dick, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'm going to set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, I think that I would say, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I can't really go into anymore. I mean, I understand what he's saying. I would say, yeah, you're giving them strength by adding your yes vote to by recognizing them. Sure, I that makes sense to me. I suppose. Yeah, sure.
But how in general would you advise someone to deal with an enemy? What
Get
would you
away,
say?
get away from them.
Yeah,
I for example, I don't want to go into the reasons why. As he plays with an object, I don't want to go into the reasons why, but I've noticed. God, it's so weird to talk about this personal stuff on this program, man. But I have noticed um, that at times in my life, I've had the misfortune to develop friendships with people who are actually destructive towards me for
yeah,
different reasons. Um, and I find the best thing to do is to get away from them.
yeah,
I had a friend in Baltimore for a long time who was a composer. And he was the only composer I knew who composed music the way I did, that is, music on paper for instruments, you know. And he was completely negative. He was just, if he could give you bad advice, he'd give you bad advice. And so finally, I just realized I got to get away from this. The relationship felt comfortable because, for different reasons, because of the musical thing, because we other aspects of it. But I finally realized that it wasn't healthy. But it took me quite some time. So I would just say, if someone, it's like any kind of negative relationship, get out of it. You know,
yeah,
get out of the relationship, identify it, and get out of it. And
yeah,
like not just relationships, but jobs, apartments, neighborhoods, whatever it isn't doing it for you. You know, you
yeah.
got, you know, don't get you're free, man. You know, I mean,
Amazing.
I know people who have made some bad decisions because they felt they were in situations which there was no escape. There's an escape. There's a thing called a door. You walk through the door. If you
Yeah,
can't walk through the door, I can understand that too. Because as
yeah,
a friend of mine said, you walk through the door and you say, I'm free, but where is my life?
yeah,
Like, let's say you're in a situation, let's say you're like in a intensive relationship, but you see it's a destructive relationship, let's say with your wife or your husband or whatever it might be. If you leave, you might say, okay, I'm out, but now what do I have? You might, and that I can see might be very, very difficult. But if you're capable of doing it, just walk out the damn door.
yeah.
Living under a bridge is preferable to that, you know. Anyway.
Your word freedom and free was great because Nassim Taleb said games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Then someone said, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist, says when the criminal gets caught, does he go, oh, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So it's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
Well, on that question, there's two things I'd like to say to you about that, because two really, real interesting things you mentioned there, and I hope that I can keep it all straight in my head.
Yeah.
As far as let me start with the last question first. As far as punishment goes, I really recommend an incredible book called Public Enemy, written by Alvin Karpis, who was a member of the Barker Gang. And it's a fascinating book about being a criminal in the 1930s. He was arrested and spent time in San Quentin, where he met Charles Manson, and actually taught Charles Manson how to play the guitar. But the thing about Alvin Karpis was his complete, utter lack of morality. And he and his friends, unbelievable. His friends, his other criminal friends, they were solid as solid could be. But the other people the other 99.9% of the world were a bunch of suckers who deserved anything they got. So that's, I think, and I have to say, even though I don't want to be a victim, I kind of respect Alvin Karpis' position. You know, it's like, because to me, it's a kind of freedom. I think that we romanticize criminals because they do express a certain type of freedom. And
Yeah.
before I forget, unless you want to make a comment upon that, I'd like to make one more comment about something else you mentioned earlier.
I can repeat the other questions because this is a deep thing, because I usually bombard people with too many quotes to get that punishment thing is, but I do want to respond to that for a second.
Please
It's
go ahead.
Alvin, spell the author's last name.
Alvin Karpis, Alvin, then
Yeah.
capital Karpis.
Okay.
Alvin Karpis, and it's called Public Enemy, and
Yeah.
it's an incredible book. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's fantastic. It's just a fantastic book. I read
No,
it.
but you can comment. Do you want me to read those couple other the
Oh,
Nassim Taleb, or
there's one more thing I want to say to you about games.
please? Yeah.
What was the comment you attributed some comment about games playing to some?
Yeah, here's Nassim Taleb. Games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who is a hero and who is not.
Well, that's an interesting thought, but I'd like to suggest another book to you on the subject of games in human society. There's a book by a scholar named Johann Huizinga, Hui. You know the book?
Oh yeah, it's huge. Yeah, we studied that. What's the name of the book again?
Homo Ludens.
Homo Ludens. Yeah.
And it's another book which I think is incredibly important, because what he's basically saying is that games is the fundamental mode of human existence.
Yeah.
That it isn't something we pick up and put on and take off like a suit of clothing. That it's our fundamental mode of existence.
Yeah.
And I find that to be I find this book very convincing. And by the way, there's a follow-up book by a French philosopher, Roger Callois, Callois, and I forget the name of his book, but I read that book too. And maybe it's available in English. But it's more thoughts about gamesmanship, and he introduces different types of games, including one which is fascinating, which is physical games, not just intellectual games, but also mental games in which you play with your mind through like what Rimbaud called disordering your senses, like with drugs, or going on fast merry-go-rounds, or those things which go up and down roller coasters, So that expresses more precisely my concept of games in the human being, which and I'm not sure what to say about it, except that through games, it's like how we began the conversation. We began like music. You compose music, and if you're serious about music, if music for you is a pursuit of truth, and if it's a philosophical enterprise in a pursuit of truth, then the idea you pursue truth, you find the truth, but then you solve one game, and then you go to the next. Then that becomes it kind of like in a dialectical fashion.
It's forever fluid or in flux. It's forever changing. It's not just settled for one linear this is it. Okay. Because, I was reading McLuhan's book, War and Peace in Global Village, this morning, and I was reading the very page where he quotes Huizinga about the importance of the word play in games. Play is another important word, but I love you stressing that book, The Fundamental Mode of Human Existence. And the follow-up would be Utah Phillips, a folk singer activist, said, anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
That's a different type of. I would say that anyone's entitled to suggest a rule, and and which can then be followed and reevaluated. Then reevaluated as people keep on their journey. I don't know. I guess my feeling about rules are, well, here's an example. Rules. I hope I don't get off the subject too much. I remember reading a long time ago about a book for first medical responders, and there was a list of rules. It says, when you get to an accident scene, here are the things you have to do. You have to make sure your implements are sterilized. You have to wash your hands. It's like a long list of things. And the last thing they say is, if it's a question of life or death, all the preceding rules can be done away with. It means if you don't have clean hands, don't have clean tools, and the guy's going to die, you can tear his chest open with your hands. And that's my feeling about rules. Who makes those rules? Yeah. I think that anyone, like in composition, I feel that musical composition is at the most meaningful when you kind of lose control. When you kind of lose control, and you have to do whatever plans you've had, kind of go through the wind, kind of go by the way, and then you're doing that last step. You're getting rid of the rules. You're tearing the chest open because that's going to keep the patient alive. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot. It's back to that TSA, or the thing you brought up about the Marines and the animals. The bottom line is you have all these charts or gauges you can study, but the bottom line is you're going to react to the intuition of the big picture, and it's like, dude, the guy's got to die, and don't wash your hands, rip his shirt off.
Yeah, that to me is when, that kind of, it's not always necessary, perhaps, but that kind of immediacy is what I think produces works of true beauty. Kind of when you're kind of on automatic pilot in a strange kind of way, and you've just got to trust, for lack of a better word, you have to trust your intuition and just go for it. And there's no guarantees,
Autopilot. I love it because I worked for George Carlin for a short time, and we got a flyer in the mail. He didn't write this, but this line sticks with me. It said, "I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity." It's like, you got to go for it. Well, how do you balance that? Like, I'm just going for it. So, Dick, I asked for 90 minutes and we're already almost there. I would love to do a part 2, because we didn't even get into music and do a whole thing on music in a part 2, a month or 2 down the line, if you're willing.
I'm totally willing. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, Jerry.
But let's stay on a couple more philosophical. Do you have a few more minutes now, or do you got to go? Okay, because here's the follow-up on the anarchy and freedom that you brought up. Freedom. T.S. Eliot said, "Freedom is only truly freedom when it appears against the background of an artificial limitation." Now, McLuhan was highly influenced by T.S. Eliot, and he said, "How are you to argue with people who insist on sticking their heads in the invisible teeth of technology, calling the whole thing freedom?" So, it's like, what has the web done to us? It's liberated us in a way, and it's confined us. It's both. So my question to you is, what does freedom mean to you now?
Well, I mean, I have to just, freedom means that I can pursue this new musical idea that I'm working on, which is a new way of, it's basically what I said maybe a little while ago, the thing about presenting information in a way which is not meant to manipulate people. You see, when I first started composing music, when I first started composing music, one of the things I took for granted was the idea that you're supposed to develop a theme. You're supposed to, repeat it if you want to. In the basic minimalist way, you just repeat the theme, or in a classical way, you take aspects, you take motives of the theme and develop each motive. There's a million ways of doing it. In a fugue, there's a thousand ways of doing it. But I realized something. I'm not interested in any of those.
Yeah.
So I had to come up with my own solution, and I did. And so to me, that's like, I felt like the Hallelujah chorus went off, like in the Buñuel film. And it's like, yeah, okay, I found it. I've been thinking this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to develop my ideas, right? Then I realized I don't have to develop my ideas. I can just express them.
Yeah.
And if people don't like it, that's the downside. That's the downside. I feel that I am, as long as I can pursue music freely, I feel in my own way, I feel like I'm free. However, the downside is it might not really mean anything to anybody else, but that's the price you have to pay. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm trying now to get people to do interest in this new music I'm composing. Well, we'll see how it goes. Maybe the next time we talk, I'll have some results,
Yeah. But Dick, the one thing that stood out throughout the discussion was the word truth, and I was going to hold this question off, but, it's basically a screenwriting teacher told me a great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. So the question is, what role does intention play in your creative process? And, what I understood you to say already in kind of answering that was the pursuit of truth.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to answer it differently, that's fine. But I'm curious, how do you determine what is true?
Okay. It is how can I put it? What I mean by that is that God, it's complicated. What I find funny about life and thought is that things are always very simple and always very complicated at the same time. Yeah. Everything meaningful is simple and complicated. For example, I would say, to me, truth is juxtaposing two ideas together.
Yeah.
But that's all I can really say. That's what it's about in music. I'll have to take some time on that one, Jerry.
That's fine, because just saying juxtaposing two ideas is perfect in a lot of ways. And we can develop it in part 2, which will lead into the whole deep delve into music. But
let me make one more comment.
Oh, yeah. No, we're not done, but go ahead.
Just as an addendum to my last statement, I would say it was something I said earlier, which is I know full well when I'm doing something which is, Socrates said when he had a little voice in his head that told him when he was saying something correct or incorrect. So he just listened to the little voice. Well, that's how I feel about my music. I feel like I have a little voice in my head. I know when I'm doing something which is full of shit, right?
Yeah.
And I stop doing it, right?
Yeah.
Even if I think it might create an emotional effect. And as a matter of fact, I would have a rule. I have a kind of rule of thumb. If I find something I write emotionally moving to myself, I don't trust it. I find when I write an idea, let's say I write it and I start to laugh, then I trust it. When I'm made to feel like a kind of like humor, then I seem to trust it more. And I think that's kind of a rule of thumb I use. It kind of reminds me of anyway, that's my first attempt to answer that question.
Yeah, that's heavy because Jack Hirschman's one of the great poets of all time, Red poet, poet laureate of San Francisco, anti-war activist. He said James Joyce was the only artist who cracked himself up. And I says, no, you can hear Frank Zappa in the middle of Joe's garage and he's laughing at himself. And so, you find the truth is like, if it emotionally is moving to yourself, then you're like, wait a minute. But if it makes you laugh, that's, you know what it is? It's Gurdjieff saying laughter is a reconciliation of yes and no. So there's this yin and yang and push and pull in humor. Humor's another, besides music, we can go into humor. But here, I have a whole page of quotes that I've studied, people saying what is true. And I thought I would read one to you and just give me any sort of thoughts on it. I'll read a couple of them to you because they all stand out huge in my life. Okay, the first one is Shelby Foote. A fact is not a truth until you love it.
Mm.
What that seems to me to be saying is that, again, it said something you talked about earlier about having an emotional relationship with some bit of information which allows it to enter into your brain. So that you actually start to care about it.
Care about it, yes.
So therefore, if you care about something, it can enter into your intellectual sphere or your life sphere. That's kind of what I guess I would say.
Here's I.F. Stone. The truth as I see it.
Well, that's that's something. I would say amen.
Yeah, because it's like he's an investigative journalist. He really spawned, helping people do some real good journalism in America. But he knew it was still, it's the truth as I see it. It still is my opinion, kind of, or my perspective, or, I love that.
A friend of mine told me a long time ago, we were walking, I guess I was about 13 or 14, and we were walking down the street somewhere in Baltimore. And he said, Bob Dylan said, the greatest thing a person can do, the greatest thing an artist can do is inspire someone else. And at the time I disagreed, but now I think he might be right. So let's say this fellow, let's say that this fellow does express his truth.
Yeah.
And it does inspire someone else to find his truth.
That's it.
Yeah. Which inspires someone else to find his truth or her truth, or their truth, whatever you might have these days. That's fine with me.
I love that.
I do my thing. I like, for example, sometimes like I've written some books and essays about music. I express myself sometimes categorically.
Yeah.
And as if I am an oracle on the mount.
Yeah.
But I don't want anyone to take it personally. It's like, to me, it's I'm trying to survive, man. Like half the time I feel like I'm drowning. If I get the energy and write an essay about music, man, about how I can compose music, and I say this is this and this is this and this is this, don't get too worked up about it. I'm not trying to force that down someone's arm. I'm describing a kind of a gestalt, man. It's like I'm not trying to force it down someone else's throat.
Yeah. No, I love what you said, Dick. It reminds me, I kind of say this once in a while. Great art fucks your shit up and it makes you go, I could do that. And so, this guy went backstage after a Sun Ra concert and he says, my kid could do that, just like Cecil Taylor and Sun Ra on the piano. And Sun Ra went, but can he transcribe it? So, three more truth quotes and we're out of here. I'm just curious your thoughts. This is Eartha Kitt.
Oh yeah, who I like a lot.
Truth is a theory that is constantly being disproved. Only lies, it seems, go on forever.
God, she was intelligent, you know. I um I, why not? I would say
But
maybe
yeah,
maybe I'm not sure if I for the eternal things, I'm not sure if I'd call them necessarily lies, but
yeah,
I might call them certain necessary illusions.
there you
But
go.
um, I'm not sure, or illusions, maybe not even necessary. I mean, it's, useful illusions. But I'm not sure if that's the same as lies. I'd have to ask Eartha Kitt what she meant by lies, you know. But
Because
that's my
it seems as though she's being tongue in cheek. She's saying, well, truth should go on forever, but it seems as though we have lies that go on forever and we should be. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. But here's Schopenhauer. You might have heard this. All truth passes through three stages. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. And third, it's accepted as being self-evident. Like we knew that all along. But at first, you're like, that's stupid. Then you're like, that's horrible. And then we're like, hey, we knew that all along.
Well, you know, I would say that principle is what motivates many of the artists that I know.
Yeah.
That is, many of the artists I know who are focused on something and don't feel particularly understood, I think somehow have that feeling inside them that one day they will be that I think it's pretty self-evident. That makes sense to me. You know, a great example is Van Gogh, for example.
Yeah.
People thought he was a nut. Maybe he
Yeah.
wasn't, but maybe his form of being nut was also a kind of precision. You know.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think yeah. Well, that anyway. Sure, that makes sense to me too. I don't really have. Yeah.
And before I do the Bob Evans, I got to interject this one. Paul Schrader, the guy who wrote Taxi Driver, he said, the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail. Now, most people like that, but it also connotates, well, I tried to sell out, but my art is so pure, it failed to, make.
I don't think selling out's a problem. I think buying in is the problem.
What does that mean?
When instead of selling out, this means you're selling your thing. If you sell your thing, that's great.
Yeah.
But if you buying in means you start to change your thing.
Oh, I see.
To be in alignment with what you think. And I've seen that happen. And that I think is fatal. That I believe is fatal to the artist and to the individual.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be happy to sell out, man. I wish someone would knock on the door right now. I'd sell out in 35 seconds. So far, I haven't had that many offers. But one thing I would not want to do is have to change what I do. If someone said, well, you can do it, but you have to do this, that doesn't interest me. You know?
Yeah, that's when they asked Frank Zappa, what do you think of jazz rock fusion? He says, the only fusion I see is between the artist and the cash box. Because, you mean if I put a rock beat to jazz, then I can sell it? Oh, we'll call it jazz rock. Okay, here's the last truth quote we'll talk about for now. Okay. Robert Evans, the pretty boy actor. Pretty boy actor became a big producer.
Yeah.
There are three sides to every story: my side, your side, and the truth. And no one is lying. Memories shared serve each one differently. So I mean, it's basically it's my side, your side, and the truth, and none of them are lying.
Well, you know, I don't want to quote myself, but at the very beginning of this interview, I was talking about my feelings about language and expression. And I said and my point was being that we can never really be sure what the other person is honestly trying to say. So, I guess I kind of feel, you know, I feel that when we speak and when we have a conversation, when people have a serious conversation, when someone creates something, what they're doing, there's an object. And what we're doing is we're trying to, it's like a sculpture. A sculpture exists. We can only look at parts of it at a time. So you're looking at this part, I'm looking at this part, I'm looking at this part. And in music, for example, there's an object. To me, music is about recreating a whole. But we can't listen to the whole thing at once. We have to hear it in parts. So we hear this part, this part, this part. And that's kind of how I see when people who are serious, people of good intention and of goodwill to get together to speak, what they're doing is they're describing different visions of an object, so I don't see any problem with that whatsoever.
Different angles, and being aware of the environment and the context. And what the word you brought up earlier, and you says, "Oh, it's an art term," but I totally agree that it's an important word. The process.
Yeah. Maybe the truth would be the object itself. And since we cannot encapsulate the entire object, perhaps what we can do is we can share our glimpses of it. That seems reasonable to me.
Share glimpses. That's what we've done. There's two more that you evoked was Picasso. This is a famous one. Art is a lie that tells the truth. That's really a catchy one, but it is. It's that, but here's the one bringing up sculpture. Frank Zappa said that music is sculpting air molecules. So he was in church and he saw as a kid that the candles would move, the flame on the candle would move when the choir sang. So he knew that there was something happening in the air, and it goes to Stravinsky's lectures on. I don't want. We're going to do music in the next one, but I love us. Stravinsky did those lectures on music. It doesn't mean anything. It's nothing, and it's like, no, it's sculpting this vibration or energy because it's coming in through our ears, but we're still experiencing some visual. If our eyes are open, we're seeing something. So there, you can't separate the because they say the neuroscientists say your sight is your most dominant sense. But I mean, for you, would you say your ear is more dominant than your eyes, or is music visually as important to you as it is hearing?
I can't really answer that question because I don't think that my relationship to music is really necessarily. For me, music is a very intellectual enterprise. There's always a relationship between the idea content of what I'm doing and the aural phenomenon. There are musicians who I think they're just into the people, like certain musicians, they like jazz. A lot of jazz players, they just like playing. I can relate. That's not where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
I have a very intellectual approach towards it. That's really all I can say about that. But
you mean it's got it's black ink on white paper, that there's a score involved.
Structure, for example.
Yeah.
To me, a big part of music, perhaps the most important aspect of music composition, is the psychological concept of how you receive information. I'm trying to not second guess in a negative or controlling way, but I'm trying to think of ways to present information to you to activate your brain, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to hypnotize you. I don't want to manipulate you. I want to activate your brain so you become a willing participant in the experience. That you hear an event and you want to hear the next event because you feel that there's a continuity, that the second event is going to somehow clarify the first event, and then the first and second event grow to become a new event, and then you heard the third event, and it creates another. So to me, that is what I'm into. The rest, I really, but to me, it's very interesting because I do view music, at least what I do, as a form of sculpture.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, we'll leave it at there, Dick. What an amazing, I look so forward to part 2. This is really good. So Sunday at noon is your best time.
Yeah, because when it's noon for you, it's 9:00 here in Paris. So that's good for me.
I'll pick a couple Sundays at noon, couple months down the road, and we'll continue. But I got to tell you, it's amazing. I'm sorry, you just keep this ball rolling for me. Bertolt Brecht says, "I don't want art that hypnotizes you or puts you in a trance. I want art that activates you." So it was really like you were saying that, and it's an amazing phenomenon. It's something.
If you can do that, I think you're doing a real service for people. I feel that you're doing something. You're helping them become conscious of their thinking process, and that's going to help. That's going to help them in every possible way in their life.
Yeah, amazing. And this aspiration that comes up constantly is we're here to make the world a better place,
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing earlier you asked me my last statement. You said who may have influenced me? Well, something I remember my father saying when I was a child was, he said for him the ideal day would be when the newspaper shows up in front of the house and there's only one sentence on it. It says, "Today there was less bullshit than yesterday, and tomorrow there'll be less bullshit than today." And I think that has kind of influenced my thinking.
That is beautiful. What was your dad's career?
Oh God, that'll be the third program we do.
But that's a real McLuhan thing. Is like you'd say Walter Cronkite would come on the news and go, "Well, today we didn't have any news to report, so you could turn your TV off and relax for 30 minutes. Less bullshit today."
Yeah.
Dick, thank you so much, man. This has been so fun and enlightening, and I'm so happy tentatively connect.
Yeah. I'll thank him too. Yeah, it was nice to put us in contact.
Yeah, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I look forward to our discussion going on forever and ever. Thank you so much.
Welcome.